everybody. Today I want to talk about the Summer of Supergirl Special #1. But first, before we talk about this, I kind of need to talk about Lobo #4 because the story in here kind of continues into this issue. There's 3 stories in Summer of Supergirl, and I really want to talk about 2 and 3, but if you pick it up, it continues out of here. So Lobo #4 basically has Lobo getting a gig trying to break into the Fortress of Solitude, but not that one. It's one that's in outer space. It's basically, the way they describe it, it is a Superman's storage unit that he keeps all his extra stuff, and so he needs to break into there. Car shows up to stop him from doing it. Shenanigans ensue with those two fighting, but then Dog, which is Lobo's dog, and Crypto evidently go on a rampage, and things don't go well there. And then the book, spoiler alert, has them basically ending up behind bars because of their dogs. And it continues into here. If you haven't picked up Lobo, it's kind of entertaining. I've enjoyed the first few issues so far. It's a silly book. It goes along. It does nothing is very serious in it, so it works out really well. But then if you pick this up, the first story, this is the Lute cover. This is the main cover for Summer of Supergirl. So the first story in here actually continues with that story out of Lobo. So I just kind of wanted to bring that up and set the ground there. It's continues the silliness and stupidity of what it is, and Supergirl being Supergirl, for the lack of better description, right? The as someone put it in one of these stories, is that they knew that she could handle it because you're Supergirl and you can make friends with anyone, and that's kind of how. But the second story in this is actually a Supergirl and Mary Marvel story. Here starts off. This is written by Gail Simone, and I think it's Gail Simone and Emma Kubert is the creators on this. Writer, penciler, of course. Sandra Hope is actually the inker. And what I found interesting about this story is kind of, this is a first meeting between Mary Marvel and Supergirl. And Mary kind of needs just someone to talk to, as #1, being very powerful women in this universe. And then orphans. And they're both orphans, and it was been hard for Mary to, she grew up in an orphanage, but so did Kara. She grew up there too. And so they kind of bond over this conversation, and they kind of take a day together to understand what is it like to live in the shadow of someone that loves you so much, but everyone looks up to. With Supergirl as Superman, and of course with Mary Marvel it's Shazam, and how that works out. And so it's actually a really well thought out story. I enjoyed it a lot. I enjoyed their conversation, and hopefully we'll get to see a little bit more of them in the future. The story was called Lost Girls. So that was great. And then the third story in this, which is, I found interesting. It's Mark Waid and Cyan Tormey is the artist. I'm sure I pronounced that incorrectly. I apologize. What I found interesting about this is it was Superboy, John Kent, and Steel. Superboy Connor. John Kent and Steel talking. And it was about the history of Supergirl. And she's gone through many different phases, as you would call it, in the DC universe. And they try to bring all that back together with different conversations. They first start off with, if you've ever read any of the older Silver Age Supergirl stuff, they talk about the different costumes that she has. And really what Mark did in this story was basically bring all the different versions together and give her a timeline in this current DC all in universe. It talked about, like, and basically some of these characters didn't know, right, that she died in a crisis. For these people, they didn't know Karen when she died in a crisis, and they were like, well, we just thought that was a rumor. And so they go through all the different things that she had actually been through, from the destruction of Krypton, from dying to save everyone during the crisis, from some of the New 52 car, and then even once again even into Woman of Tomorrow, how they're bringing all of that back in, because in the Woman of Tomorrow book, she's in her early 20s. I know in the movie it's 21, but in the book I think it's a little different. It's just her birthday. So it's very interesting how they're bringing all these people together to have them understand really who Supergirl is and who she isn't, really, right? Like, everyone wants to relate her to Superman, but she's not. And even Batman throws in his 2 cents about what she's truly had to overcome through this. And I think they did a good job of setting up how she is currently in the current Sophie series, where she's back in Midvale. And I think they handle all that well in this book. It covers the gambit, so it is really a good setup. And I feel like they've tried to correct a lot of characters in the DC universe in this all-in setup. The Donna Troy was one of them. The the Titans Annual that came out a couple of years ago now kind of helped clear up a lot of that stuff. But anyway, if you're kind of wanting to get an idea of who Supergirl is, you haven't read Supergirl before, or you just have and you just hadn't picked this up, I would suggest picking this up, at least, if nothing else. If you don't care about Lobo and you don't care about the Lobo book and this Lobo story, the first story in here can be read by itself. It's a quick synopsis of what happened in Lobo, so you're not really going to miss anything if you don't read the Lobo book. But I highly suggest you read it for the second and third story. I think it's handled really well, and explaining to you who really Supergirl is and how she handles and what she does. So anyway, that is my reviews for this week. I would pick these up. Anyway, hope you all have a good one. Enjoy your read. We'll talk to you later.